my god, Sanny. It's not what you think.
I won the $800 million lottery and rushed to surprise my wife at work. What I saw ended our marriage. She married a mechanic's son and got exactly that. Small hands, small dreams, small life. That's what she said to me that morning, standing in front of the bathroom mirror with her lipstick already on, like she'd rehearsed it in her head a dozen times before letting it out loud. My name is Sonny Halt. I'm 34 years old, and until 6 weeks ago, I fixed transmissions for a living at a plant outside Toledo. I want to tell you what happened after those words left her mouth, because it's the kind of thing you don't believe until you've lived it, and even then, some mornings I still don't. Christine didn't wait for me to answer. She never did. She grabbed her blazer off the hook, checked her reflection one more time, and said something about being late for a client call, though I noticed she'd started saying that a lot lately. Always a client call, always in the evenings, always with her phone turned face down on the counter like it was radioactive. I didn't say anything back. I've never been a man who raises his voice. My father used to tell me that anger is just fear wearing a loud shirt. And if you want to actually fix something, an engine, a marriage, a life, you don't scream at it. You listen to it first. You figure out what's actually broken before you go pulling parts. So I stood there in the kitchen after she left, coffee going cold in my hand, and I thought about the folded slip of paper sitting in my toolbox out in the garage. 6 numbers. $800 million before taxes. Nobody knew. Not my coworkers, not my neighbors, not even Walt yet, though that would change by the end of the day. Especially not Christine. I checked those numbers 11 times the night, I found out, sitting in my truck in the parking lot of the gas station on Detroit Avenue. Engine running, radio off, hands shaking in a way they hadn't shook since I was 19 years old holding my father's hand at my mother's funeral. I didn't call anyone that night. I just sat there and let it be true for a while, alone, the way you let a diagnosis be true before you say it out loud to the people who love you. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about a woman who calls you small. Sometimes she's not wrong about what you have. She's just wrong about what it means. I finished my coffee. I rinsed the mug. And before I left the shop that morning, I did what I've been doing every morning for 2 weeks straight without her noticing. I glanced at the drawer in my toolbox where the ticket sat folded inside an old parts envelope, tucked behind a torque wrench I hadn't used since March. I didn't know yet exactly what I was going to do about her. I didn't know about Todd Bricker, not really, not with proof. I only knew what I'd started to notice. The phone, the showers the second she walked in the door, a receipt I'd found in her coat pocket for a Marriott happy hour on a Thursday afternoon when she'd told me she was at the office. I locked the garage door behind me and drove to work, and somewhere between the house and the plant, I made a decision I hadn't fully admitted to myself yet. I was going to find out exactly what my wife thought I was too small to notice. Please, before I continue, kindly share, and subscribe for more interesting stories. The numbers had matched at 11:42 that night. Engine idling, gas station lights flickering through the windshield. 6 weeks earlier, but it felt like 6 years. I called Walt before I called anyone else, before I even called Christine, and I remember exactly what I said. "Walt, it's me. I need you to keep this quiet." He didn't ask why. He just said okay, the way he used to say okay when my father brought him a part that didn't belong in the engine it came out of. I sat in my truck another 20 minutes after that call, watching my own hands on the wheel like they belonged to someone else. I thought about the garage, about my father teaching me to listen for a knock before I ever touched a wrench. I thought about Christine asleep at home, no idea her husband had just become someone else entirely. I didn't feel joy. I felt something closer to dread, like I'd been handed a loaded question I wasn't ready to answer yet. I drove home slow that night, radio off, and when I got into bed beside her, she stirred and asked where I'd been. "Working late," I told her. It was the first lie I'd ever told her. It wouldn't be the last one either of us told that year. The phone thing started small enough that I almost missed it. Face down on the counter, every time, screen dark before I could glance at it twice. Then the showers, the second she walked through the door before dinner, before she even said hello, like she needed to wash something off before she could look at me. I found a receipt by accident, doing laundry, a Marriott happy hour charge dated the previous Thursday, the same Thursday she'd told me she was stuck at the office until 8. I didn't confront her. My father never confronted an engine either. He just took photos of the wear pattern and figured out what it meant before he said a word. So I photographed the receipt with my phone right there in the laundry room and sent it to one person. Walt didn't respond for 6 hours. When he finally did, it was 4 words. I'll look into it. I folded the receipt back into the pocket exactly the way I'd found it. And I went downstairs and made dinner like nothing in my chest had just quietly cracked down the middle. Walt's office still smells like the shop did when I was a kid, motor oil and old paper, even though he hasn't turned a wrench professionally in almost 15 years. He spent 2 decades untangling corporate fraud before he went independent, and my father trusted him with things he wouldn't tell his own brother. I sat across from him with the receipt printed out between us, and he studied it the way he used to study a busted alternator, turning it over like the answer was hiding on the back. If she's doing what I think she's doing, he told me, you're going to want proof before you want anger. I nodded, though anger was already sitting low in my stomach, patient, waiting its turn. He said he'd start quiet. Hotel records, a few calls, nothing that would spook anybody. I trusted him completely. I always had. Before I left, your dad taught you that. He gripped my shoulder. Don't forget it now. And said, just one because more it hurts. Thing. I saw that stuck harder than anything for what he was before I ever knew his name. You find what's broken before you go screaming. It was at a company happy hover for Christine's firm. One of those events wives get dragged to twice a year, and I was standing near the parking lot when I heard him. Leased Audi, a story about a boutique consulting firm launching any day now, a voice pitch just loud enough for the room to hear. I watched him ask the bartender to run his car twice, quiet, hoping the first one had failed silently. Christine laughed at something he said, too easily, the kind of laugh that isn't really about the joke. I didn't feel rage watching them. I felt something stranger, a kind of stillness, like when you already know a part is going to fail, and you're just waiting for the sound it makes when it finally does. I drove home that night without saying a word to her about it. She didn't even know I'd been there. Some men need to burn a house down the second they smell smoke. I've never been that kind of man. I just started paying closer attention to which rooms had the smoke in them. I ordered the car on a Tuesday. Pink, custom, a color she mentioned once on our second date 11 years ago and probably forgot she'd ever said. I hadn't. Some men remember anniversaries. I remember the exact sentence my wife used to describe her dream car before she ever became the kind of woman who'd need reminding what dreaming felt like. I told the dealership to deliver it Friday at noon to her office with a bouquet, the whole show. That same week, at her firm, I heard secondhand that she told a coworker things are about to change, and I let myself wonder what she meant by it, knowing full well what I meant by the car. That evening she came home and kissed me on the cheek like nothing in her life needed forgiving, and I made dinner and let her think the man across the table hadn't changed since the mechanic's son she married. He hadn't really. He just learned exactly what he was worth. And he was done being told otherwise by a woman washing someone else's hands off her body every night before dinner. Walt called Thursday night, calm the way he always is right before something isn't. Hotel records confirmed it. Every Thursday, for months running, same room number of the Marriott downtown. He'd found the valet too, a young woman named Denise Coleman who logged every vehicle that came and went, security footage backed up on a server nobody had thought to wipe. The gifts arrived Friday at noon. Walt told me, be there at 12:15. 15 minutes was all he needed for the last piece to fall into place. Whatever that piece was, he wouldn't tell me yet. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to Christine, listening to her breathe, wondering how a person keeps a whole second life folded up so neatly inside one that looks, from the outside, exactly like devotion. In the morning, she kissed me goodbye and told me to have a good day at the shop, and I told her I would. And for the first time in 6 weeks, that wasn't a lie. It was going to be a very good day. Friday, 12:14 p.m. I pulled up in the Rolls-Royce with the bouquet on the passenger seat, and a small crowd had already gathered outside her building. Coworkers, a couple of phones already filming, the kind of scene that writes itself before it even starts. Through the glass lobby doors, I saw the stairwell alcove first, and then I saw her in it, and then I saw who she was with. Christine, mouth against Todd Bricker's mouth, one hand fisted in his collar like she'd done 100 times before because she had. Behind them, unnoticed by either, stood Denise Coleman, phone still raised from photographing deliveries, frozen mid-motion like she'd just realized whose marriage she was watching end in real time. I didn't move. I didn't drop the flowers. I just stood there in the lobby of my wife's office building, holding her dream car's keys in one hand and 11 years of my life in the other, and waited for her to turn around and see exactly what she'd traded it all for. Her face went the color of old drywall when she turned and saw me standing there with the flowers and the car behind me catching the noon sun. My chest didn't break the way I expected it to. It just went quiet, the way an engine goes quiet right before you realize it's already dead and you're only now hearing the silence for what it is. Todd's expression did something else entirely. I watched the math happen behind his eyes, watched him clock the car, the crowd, the flowers, and understand for the first time exactly who he'd been competing with without knowing there was a competition. Christine's mouth opened and nothing came out. Someone in the small crowd gasped, low, like they'd been holding their breath the whole scene without meaning to. I set the bouquet down on the reception desk, gently, the way you set down something you no longer need but don't want to break out of spite. Then I turned around and walked back out to the car neither of them would ever ride in, and I drove away before either of them found their voice. That evening I sat in Walt's garage office, my hands still smelling faintly of the flower shop, and neither of us said much for a long while. Then he said it, the thing my father used to say when an engine came in worse than expected. You don't fix it by screaming at it. You find what's broken and you replace it. I nodded, staring at a stack of old case files instead of at him, because it was easier than looking anyone in the eye that night. Across town, I'd later learn, Christine discovered the joint accounts had been quietly restructured weeks earlier, long before the flowers, long before the car. She was locked out of everything she'd assumed would always be half hers. It wasn't just a marriage she'd lost that afternoon. It was the version of her future she'd been building in secret, propped up on someone else's borrowed money and a lie about a consulting firm that didn't exist. I went home alone that night, to a house that suddenly felt twice as large and half as complicated, and for the first time in 6 weeks, I slept. Judge Kowalski's courtroom moved the way Walt always said good work moves. Quiet, unhurried, no wasted motion. Walt laid the timeline out plainly. The ticket purchased and secured in trust 6 full weeks before Todd Bricker's name ever entered the picture, meaning Christine had no claim to a cent of it under the law. I watched her hand shake reaching for a water glass, small and involuntary, the kind of thing you can't fake and can't hide. In the hallway outside, I heard later Todd was already on his phone explaining to a landlord why rent would be late again, his consulting firm still nothing but a story he told the parties. Walt closed his part of the hearing simply. Sonny's father taught him you check the part before it fails, not after. That's the only reason there's anything left here to divide fairly. Christine didn't look at me once during any of it. I didn't need her to. I'd already gotten the only answer I ever really came for. The settlement was clean, fair, exactly what the law required, and not $1 more from the trust. The Rolls-Royce sat unclaimed at the dealership for 3 weeks until I donated it to a trade school raffle back in Toledo, funding scholarships for machinists who'd never get handed anything they didn't earn first. I used to think that lottery ticket was the biggest thing that ever landed in my toolbox drawer. It wasn't. The biggest thing was finding out exactly what I already had and exactly what I didn't. Christine once told me I'd topped out at oil changes, that she'd married a mechanic's son and gotten exactly that. Months later, I stood in my father's old garage teaching a nervous 16-year-old apprentice how to listen to an engine before it fails, sleeves rolled up, hands steady, and I thought about that sentence one more time. She'd been right about what I was. She just never understood that it was the only thing that ever actually held.